Good. I'll call this meeting to order. This is the January meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals. We'll begin by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, please, if you will stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and if the Secretary will call the roll, please.
Kathy Postlethwaite.
Present.
Jim Hurst.
Present.
Josh Martin.
Present.
Amanda Miller.
Present.
All present.
Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Welcome to our two new members. Hopefully you will find this an entertaining evening, and we appreciate very much your joining us. Welcome.
Thank you.
The first item on our agenda is the election of officers, and although we are short one member, we will go ahead and do this. So the chair will accept nominations for the officer. That we will be electing a chair and a vice chair. And we will open the nominations with anyone for chairman.
I nominate our current,
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
she did a great job. She should do it again.
Very much. In that case, we will vote on the motion for myself as chairman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The next item is to elect a vice chair, and the chair, we're accepting nominations for the office of vice chair. I nominate Jim Hurst. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Amanda. Any further discussion? All in favor of Jim Hurst as the vice chairman of the BZA, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Thank you very much. Hopefully you've all had a chance to look at the minutes from our December meeting. And granted, there were only two of us currently present who were at that meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
I didn't find any, no.
Is it appropriate for all of us to vote, even though we were not all present?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. No additions or corrections?
I move we accept the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Hurst. Any discussion? All in favor of accepting the minutes as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The minutes are approved as presented. Our first item of new business is docket number 2024-50-DSV, and that is Skiage. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that appropriately. Enterprises. Is the petitioner here this evening, or representative? Okay, thank you. We will start with the staff report, and then afterwards we'll ask you to approach the podium, give your name and address, and then make your 15-minute presentation on this petition. Thank you. Mr. Smith, staff report.
So this is a development standard variance to section 194082 to do two things. One, reduce the 20-foot front yard setback requirement along the, I believe it's the south property line, and to eliminate the buffer yard B standard along the south property line. You can see we've attached the exhibits, specifically the site plan, if you want to take a look at that. It'll show you the areas that we're talking about. If I can pull it up here. So to get to, here we go. So you'll see the parking lot goes right up to the property line, which is essentially the cause for the needed variances that we just stated. To jump to staff's positioning relative to the first variance request, which is to reduce the minimum front yard. Staff is not supportive of this request, really for three reasons. Question one, the grant will be injurious to public health and safety. Eliminating the minimum front yard will eliminate visual consistency along the north side of the access easement. And the second reason we stated, it would force sidewalks to maneuver right next to the parking lot, which will limit the area for vehicles and pedestrians to maneuver safely. Question number two, the use or value of the area adjacent to the property will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. Staff disagrees on this criteria. We believe allowing the petitioner to eliminate the front yard will be adversely impactful. A well-maintained front yard has the potential to increase property values. Eliminating this zoning standards could decrease the overall value of this development, leading to an adverse impact on surrounding properties. And then the final point, strict application of the zoning ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship in the use of the property. Staff disagrees. Circling to unnecessary hardship, a claim of unnecessary hardship granting a variance cannot be based on self-created conditions. Simply showing economic loss is not sufficient. If you read the petitioner's findings, granting this request will allow for the inclusion of an outdoor area. Although it's nice, this is not a unique condition on the property, and it's not a requirement by the zoning ordinance. This is essentially a design choice, a design decision by the petitioner, meaning, in this case, we think this is a self-created condition causing the need for this request. So, circling back, variance number one, staff does not support granting that request. Skipping ahead to variance number two, which is to eliminate the buffer yard requirement. Again, staff does not support this standard for many of the same reasons. Essentially, for 1 and 2, it's the same thing. You're building right up to the property line, eliminating that standard, and then skipping to unnecessary hardship. Again, all relevant factors taken together indicate that the land involved cannot yield a reasonable return because of unique circumstances. A claim of unnecessary hardship justifying a grant of a variance cannot be based upon a self-created condition. Again, circling back to what I stated for the first request, we believe these results from self-created conditions, design choices from the petitioner. Therefore, we do not believe this rises to the standard of unnecessary hardship, and therefore we do not support it. Happy to answer any questions you have about either request.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Are there questions for staff about this petition? I do have one question. The neighboring property to the west does have the appropriate setbacks and buffer and so on. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
I had one question. The property to the south, would it have the same setbacks as well?
Property to the south that's undeveloped right now will be held to the same standard. Yes.
And I think I read that there's a 30-foot easement on the east side of this property. Is that right?
There is a 30-foot easement running along the east side, and a 10-foot, I believe it's a 10-foot planting buffer as well, but yes.
Any additional questions for staff? Petitioner representative, is this, are you Mr. Tharp?
Yes.
If you would give your name and address, please, for the record.
My name is Drew Tharp. I'm an attorney with Gutwein Law. Our offices are at 300 North Meridian Street in Indianapolis.
Thank you.
So I'm here on behalf of the petitioner, SkyEdge Enterprises. They plan to construct and operate a memory care facility here on the site. The exact number of patients is yet to be determined, but will likely end up somewhere around 12 patients at any given time, as well as one staff member always on site and in the facility. We applied for these variances due to the unique layout of the site. As you noted, we have the 30-foot easement on the east side, which we're not allowed to build in. The lot kind of has a narrow north-south layout to begin with, and the easement further condenses the buildable area here. And as staff noted, we do intend or hope to provide an outdoor space for our residents on the north side of the building, which further pushes the building and parking lot south. However, we think a lot of staff's concerns are mitigated by the fact that this is a property at the end of a dead-end street. There will not be traffic in and out. I mean, this is a site that will have minimal traffic in and out to this site, and obviously with the current lot across the street currently undeveloped, we don't anticipate much traffic, vehicular or pedestrians, coming down to our end of the street. We also plan to provide the necessary plantings to try to maintain some of that consistent look. Currently along the street, there are a row of trees that go, from our lot all the way down to the corner, and we do plan to continue that look. It's a fairly modest use, as I said, roughly 12 residents, minimal traffic in and out. However, the use requires certain building considerations. It needs to be all one floor. We can't build up and put residents upstairs. We have to have wide hallways, things like that. So there's really not much opportunity to reduce the size of the building and maintain a viable product. As for the buffer yard, again, we anticipate maintaining the required plantings, although the parking lot would come up to the street. We do intend to fit into this neighborhood as best we can. I believe that's essentially the high points of what I want to hit. Again, we feel as though it's a modest use for a modest parcel, and further compounded by the easement issue that limits our building space, and so we feel as though this site plan provides the best balance of form and function for our intended use.
Mr. Tharp, are there questions for the petitioner? I do have one question. Is this building based on an existing formula? In other words, are there multiple facilities by this same company? This is a one-off, essentially.
Yes, this is his first venture in this field.
Okay, so it's not as if you're replicating a formula that you know has worked in other settings, and that's why you need the plan that you've submitted here.
To an extent, my client, the operating entity, will ultimately be run by someone who has experience in this field, and the site plan is informed by her experience. However, my client does not run other entities like this.
And you mentioned that you mentioned a row of trees and plantings which you would continue, but I'm not, on the schematic, I'm not seeing where you're talking about, because it looks to me like the parking lot goes right up to the edge of the property line.
I believe it would be in that center. Oh, you know what? I'm mistaken, aren't I? I'll come back to that. I'm sorry, I misspoke on that. We will not, with this site plan, we will not have those plantings. We will meet the required plantings for that south property line, but they will not be coming across the parking lot.
But you're talking about eliminating the buffer yard requirement, which would include plantings.
You want to speak to this? This is my colleague Chad Mays is.
You would give your name and address, please, for the record.
Good evening. My name is Chad Mays. I'm with Kimley Horn & Associates, the site civil and landscape architect. Representative, we're at 500 East 96th Street, Suite 300 in Indianapolis. So to touch on the trees and the plantings along the right-of-way there, or I believe it's actually a private street, but along the south property line, the intent is to place one tree basically in the southwest corner there in the green space between the adjacent property and ours, as well as two in the southeast near that north-south sidewalk on our site. So the intent is to meet the plantings. However, I think it's planning's point of view that since the parking is in that buffer, it's not necessarily considered a buffer yard. But our intent is to still meet the planting count as well as the species. Does that answer your question?
Well, not precisely, because is that not a parking lot? I mean, that will not be a hard surface parking lot that will go up to the property line?
That's correct, ma'am. The intent, though, was to achieve the planting count, and so we would have it along the south property line, just not in that center island area. It would be on the east and west side of the parking lot, along that frontage.
I think I can help clarify. So part of the buffer, there's two things. You're going to have plants and you're going to have grass, essentially. I might get the number wrong, but I think it's 10 foot worth of grass is part of buffer yard B. And then there's so many number of plants. What they're saying is they can't provide the grass, right? Because they're building the parking lot all the way to the property line. They're still going to provide, if I'm hearing you correctly, the number of trees.
That's correct.
So if you approve a motion to completely eliminate the buffer yard B, you need to make sure you speculate or condition that they still install the required number of plantings if they're willing to agree to that. Because if you completely eliminate the buffer yard B standard, they won't have to provide the grass or the plants. It'll just be completely eliminated. So.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Are there additional questions for the petitioner?
Was there any substantive change between the initial filing and the revised filing that was made?
No, our revised filing added the request for the elimination of the buffer yard.
I guess my question for you would be, this is a half an acre site, and when you look at this site and you know that you want to put a facility there, you also understand what the ordinances require. And is it not possible for you to build a facility that would meet the need that you're describing and still be consistent with the ordinances as they exist for that piece of property? I mean, you're essentially a tabula rasa there with nothing but ground. So,
as I said, the major complicating factor here is that easement. That easement reduces our site by over 20%, which limits our building area. We have, in light of the staff reports released last week, we have tried to come up with some alternatives, and we do have a proposal which we can share with you that would, rather than eliminating these standards entirely, would shrink them by about half. We would push everything back push everything north about 9.5 feet, which would allow us to have some of that grass continue to meet the planting requirements. Outdoor space on the north side, but would at least allow us to try to meet you in the middle here. Otherwise, our best alternative, we are trying to come up with a way, Chad and I have been talking all day today, trying to come up with a way to meet that full 20-foot standard. But even that may ultimately require a parking variance at that point. So we're not comfortable putting that forward yet, but we do have an alternative that we could offer 9.5 feet.
okay, so perhaps it's worth, has that been submitted? The alternative that he's talking about, has that been submitted to the staff?
So is the one that I believe you emailed to me this afternoon, is that the one you're referring to?
Well, I shared with you the 20-foot proposal that, as
Yeah.
I said, we're not totally comfortable with yet. We do have
Yeah.
copies of the site plan for the 9.5-foot proposal that we can.
So I have
Share
not
now,
seen
but
the
we have not shared
9.5
that.
foot proposal. So this will be or at least I don't think I've seen the
No, you
9.5
haven't.
foot.
So
this
when
will
you're
be
saying
the first.
9.5 feet, that's the setback, you're talking
From
about
the
9.5
property
feet versus-
line back toward the building, if I'm hearing you correctly, there'll be 9.5 feet worth of grass,
Yes.
essentially.
Yes.
So you would be a half a foot short on the buffer yard standard. And you would still, depending on how you designed the island in the middle, you might still be having a drive aisle that would go through the 20-foot setback. So you
Correct.
might still need both variances. It would just be less of an encroachment.
Reduced, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's my best guess, having not seen the site plan.
Thoughts?
I was just curious on the bed count. You said that you don't have an exact number yet. You said you're around 12, but I'm just curious on how the variances affect those counts for you guys.
They don't. Ultimately, as I hopefully communicated earlier, don't have room to shave off square footage from the building, so that they don't.
Okay.
That's the short answer.
We're going to put forth, I want to spend a couple more minutes thinking about is, it is a dead-end road. Trouble seeing my way through to your guys' point of view right now, I'm afraid.
Question. Did the Zionsville Fire Department weigh in on this? What were their comments?
They requested an exhibit for turnaround because of the dead end and the limited access for the parking lot. Because Zionsville has a relatively, it's pretty large fire rig. So we provided that and he had no further comments. I did bring those exhibits if you'd like to see it.
Okay, so that's not reflected in this site plan.
It's not shown on this, no, but we have hard copies if you all would like to see it.
Okay. All right. And that revised site plan would still require the variance.
I'm sorry, if
request.
you were asking if the fire department saw that revised site plan,
Yeah.
they did not.
Oh,
They saw this one.
Okay.
It's the same parking lot dimensions. The only difference is it's all shifted 9.5 feet north, right?
Okay.
So theoretically, it should still operate with that turn exhibit the same way. It would just go further north into
Okay.
the site.
Okay, so the 9.5-foot shift to the north is in part intended to accommodate the fire department's concerns.
That is not. The fire department's concerns were addressed with the site plan you do see here.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was about to say, Mike, we've received fire's approval on what you're seeing on the screen.
okay.
So fire has already approved everything,
All right, great. Thank you.
so.
I guess as much as this is a dead-end street, it is a dead-end street which is only partly populated at this moment. There's currently one building, according to my looking at the site photo, aerial photo. There's already one building on that street. You would be building number 2, and then there are 2 lots to the south of you that both are undeveloped, if that's what I understand.
One of those lots to the south is developed. Yes.
Okay, so
That
this photo,
southwest corner is developed.
this photo must be aged, must be old, because it's not shown here. So there is a lot that's directly south of you that still has to be developed.
Correct.
So there is an aesthetic component to this. It's not purely function in that having the setback and the buffer yard does improve the appearance of the building from the street. And you would have neighbors who would be, you would be inconsistent with at least the existing properties so far, if I understand correctly. So I think that is something that needs to be taken into consideration, even though it is a street that doesn't really continue after it gets past you. I feel a lot like Mr. Hurst here, that it's essentially putting something on a space that's really just not quite big enough to accommodate it for myself. Further discussion? Are we ready to make a decision? Thank you. Drew, is there anybody online or anybody in the room that would like to speak about this petition?
I think, given the current discussion, I think we'd like to ask for a continuance. try to figure
Continuance?
out an alternative here.
Okay. Thoughts? I have a motion to continue.
I'd be happy to make such a motion if the petitioner thinks there can.
Yeah.
Ready for a motion,
Okay.
please.
All right, I gotta put the glasses back on now. I move that docket number 2024-50-DSV.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hurst. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Further discussion? Do we need to do a roll call? Yes? Let's do a roll call vote. Mr. Secretary?
Jim Hurst.
Aye.
Kathy Postlethwaite.
Aye.
Josh Martin.
Aye.
Amanda Miller.
Aye.
Thank you.
And on the second, for 2024-50-D.
Thank you, Mr. Hurst. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Further discussion? Okay, roll call vote.
Jim Hurst.
Aye.
Josh Martin.
Aye.
Andrea Miller.
Aye.
Kathy Postlethwaite.
Aye. Thank you very much. We'll see you in February then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the docket is docket number 2024-51-DSV. And this is Matt Fortney, the petitioner and his representative here. Thank you very much. Staff report, Mr. Smith.
Yes, ma'am. This is a continuation, in part, from one of the projects we had at our previous meeting in December, the Goodwill project. During that meeting, you'll remember that we approved reducing or encroaching across building lines. This is, and those were approved. This is focusing now, if I can get the site plan to zoom in. This is focusing on the landscaping along the eastern property line. Essentially, the petitioner is requesting a variance to allow the landscaping that you see on the screen to go within that easement. For all of the same reasons that staff was supportive of the previous two variances in December, staff also supports this request, mainly with the end goal of having uniform development from the street. If you notice, if I can zoom this up, you'll notice that the parking lot and the landscaping, which you can't really see in that photo, it would all be very consistent with the already developed properties to the north. And really, that's what staff is trying to achieve with supporting these variance requests. The only concern that staff has, and I'm going to hope that Matt and them can speak to it, is receiving approval from the easement holder or owner. We would like to see some sort of written approval from the utility that allows and approves the petitioner to place that landscaping within the easement. That would be the only condition that we would request. Other than that, staff is supportive. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Are there questions for staff? Okay, Mr. Price, if you would. Please give your name and address for the record.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. My name is Matt Price. I'm an attorney at Denton's at 10 West Market Street, Indianapolis, Indiana, representing Goodwill. Those of you who are who were members of the board at the conclusion of the 2024 calendar year will remember the approval of the two variances that Mr. Smith mentioned with regard to parking lot variances, which allowed the line for the parking lot to encroach into the setback. That allowed us to reconcile some conflicting definitions between the original Boone County zoning, which, under which this property was originally developed and platted, and the town of Zionsville's current standards. As a follow-up to that, and it was discovered really after we had made our initial filing and not in time for us to get it within the notice for the petitions that were heard last month, it was discovered that we would, as a result of this proposal, have plantings within a buffer yard that was encumbered by a water line easement. And the ordinance proscribes the development director from approving plantings in an easement. And so what we're seeking is a variance to permit those plantings within the easement. And we do agree with Mr. Smith's condition and concern that we provide evidence that the easement holder is amenable and in agreement with that. We're happy to provide that. We've had a great deal of correspondence with that easement holder now, which is the water utility. They have certain parameters about the location of plantings in relation to their water line that we're very accustomed to dealing with. This is a somewhat antiquated easement in that we've had to do some title research and some field work to identify the location of the water line and the terms of the easement itself. So it may require some cleaning up between the petitioner and the utility, but we're committed to doing that and certainly willing to make that a condition to the approval. And we've got some time to work that out, as this will also require a development plan approval before the Plan Commission, should we be approved tonight and go forward with additional proceedings. And I could just briefly, I'll show kind of the orientation of some things in the PowerPoint. This gives a little background about Goodwill, which you're familiar with, certainly from their presence here in Boone County and elsewhere. If you go forward. Star is the general location of the subject parcel, which is really the last lot, if you will, in the development, right at the southwest corner of 96th Street and Zionsville Road. And then the kind of the aqua area is the buffer yard, or I guess the width of the easement, really, the width of the water line easement. And that red line is the water line location itself. And so what we would accomplish if this variance were granted is we'd be able to fit in the required vegetation between the water line and the edge of the buffer yard. And kind of not unlike what we were talking about with the prior petition, this petition is to maintain the consistency as you go further north. The setbacks that were granted last month allowed us to essentially match up the location of the parking lot on this property with the parking lot to the north. Its landscaping is similarly located within a buffer yard that's encumbered by an easement. We believe, just through visual observation, that their plantings may be actually just right on top of the water line even. So it's unclear whether that received approval at the time, but we would certainly be willing to provide written evidence of our easement holder's approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Are there questions for the petitioner?
This is distinct from the last petition in that this actually matches the world.
I'm just still a bit surprised at the line, the red line of the water line. It looks to me like it goes really close to the road there, but maybe that's normal. I'm not expert in that field, so.
I asked Mr. Sheward, he is educated in
Oh,
that
okay,
world,
well,
and I am not either, but you might be able to enlighten us.
Hi, Brian Sheward, Kimley Horn & Associates. I'm the civil engineer on the project. Offices at 500 East 96th Street, similar to Chad, who was here before. Suite 300. I'm going to help you guys out. Have a zoom in of that graphic, because admittedly there's a lot happening on the east side of this site. And hopefully I won't bore you too much, but I do want to, Matt did a nice job and staff, but it is a little confusing. If you can see my screen, the red line is a surveyed water line location, so that's based on field mark. You call 811, they come out and they field mark where it's at. I subsequently reached out to Rich Newell, who's the person at Citizens Energy Group who helps with private development projects. This is a unique location because it was formerly a part of the whole Dow plant. So there's a lot of history here. And what you see is the aqua is a 15-foot water main easement. West of that is a light green hatch. That's a 15-foot sanitary sewer easement. They actually overlap each other slightly. Rule of engineering, I would say, is 99.9% of the time, don't put landscaping in a sanitary sewer easement. Not a good idea. The roots will find the sewer over time. It can clog it up, cause problems. Water main easements, they tend to be more flexible. So Citizens, as a matter of practical experience, and this is what Rich verbally told me, and there's a long email chain back and forth with him, as long as we stay 5 feet away from the physical location of where the water main was surveyed, they don't take issue with plantings being in that close to their facilities, with the understanding that if they ever need to come out and maintain their line, dig it up for any reason, it's on the owner to replace landscaping. They won't work them. They'll probably try to stay away from the landscaping. So as I move from north to south on this graphic, literally straddling between the water main and the edge of that green sanitary sewer easement, and you can see, to your point, you're correct, the water main does slide over about halfway down the site. It's an oddity, but that does happen depending on what was, I think at the time that water main was in, 96th Street didn't even continue west. So there's kind of some odd things going on there. But essentially, we're threading the needle between the sanitary easement, which we can't go in, the water main easement, which we can be in, but we have to stay away 5 feet from the line. So the material here is probably a lot more advanced than you would see at this. We haven't even got to a development plan, but we wanted to ensure that we could fit it all in given the constraints. And we'd be happy to work with Rich to get in writing. It was kind of tough over the holidays with people being out on vacation as well.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you. Questions?
Well, either of you gentlemen, I guess. Is this a general water, or is it actually owned by Citizens?
It's written to be a water main easement. Now, the grantee and the grantor, I think as it is right now, I got to get that right. The grantor is Dow Chemical Company. The grantee is implied to be the property owner. It was almost as if it was written at the time with the expectation that there was going to be a land transfer that would happen, which I think then became Browning Investments, who Jamie Browning now owns the property. So through that conversation with Rich at Citizens, he reached out to his real estate department. We got the easement, and he said, oh, this isn't our standard easement. As we go through the process over the next few months, we should get that cleaned up, quote unquote. So we don't take any issue working with them over the next few months to, I don't know, you can help me re-record the easement with their standard terms. Their standard terms would allow for what we're asking for here, and they're currently the only utility utilizing that water main easement as it's written. So it's not a general utility easement, it's written as a water main easement. They happen to be the facility that's there. And I did confirm that it is a public Citizens water main, because for a moment it could have been a private water line, but that's not the case. They said it shows in their system that it's a public water main. It's just the records from 2025 or 2005. It got lost in the shuffle is essentially what's happened. So personally, I'm comfortable we'll work it out with them and get the document cleaned up through attorney work and lead up to the development plan, and that's where we would confirm that we have that in writing, that it's okay to have within 5 feet of the water main.
Further questions? I think.
Thank you for hearing me out. It gets a little heady.
No,
so, yeah.
this is very helpful, actually. And I think if there is an approval, it would have to be contingent upon all of these details that you're describing, the planets aligning just perfectly for this to be a go. Further questions for either the petitioner or the staff? Are we ready to make a decision?
All right, I gotta make sure.
Just a moment, I've been reminded. Is there anyone here who would like to speak about this petition in either for or in opposition? No one? Thank you. You can just leave this written. Okay, now we're ready.
All right.
Thank you.
I move that docket number 2024-51-BSC Development Standards Variance to allow buffer yard landscaping easement be conditionally approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff. Additional approval is granted contingent that all written approval.
Well done. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
B
Hurst.
minus at best, but thank you.
Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Further discussion? Good. We'll take a roll call vote, please. Mr. Dale?
Jim Hurst.
Aye.
Josh Morton.
Aye.
Amanda Miller.
Aye.
Kathy Postlewaite.
Aye. Thank you. Granted. Thank you very much. Okay, so that is the last of the petitions on our agenda. We do have some other things to be considered this evening. We have the letter of engagement with the law firm that we need to approve. Hopefully, you've all had a chance to look at that. Are there questions or comments that perhaps we can have answered? Any thoughts?
With on both Planning Commission for a couple of years and BZA now for a few months, I found the firm and the individuals they send to represent the town are well-informed and guide the town and its commission as well.
Would agree with you completely. So what we need is a motion to approve the letter of engagement with the firm. Do I have a? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Miller. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hurst. Further discussion? Okay, if we would have a roll call vote, please.
Amanda Miller.
Aye.
Jim Hurst.
Aye.
Josh Morton.
Aye.
Kathy Postlewaite.
Aye.
Sorry,
Thank you.
Andrea. Is it Andrea?
Amanda.
Amanda. I did have it right. Okay,
We'll
Amanda.
get it. We're,
Thank you.
It's all
this is
right.
day one, so
You can call me anything. Hey,
No, not at all, not
That's
at
what
all.
my kids do, so.
very good. Okay, thank you. So I think the only additional thing is that we will be doing a training, a BZA training, and discussion is to perhaps have that following our meeting on February 5th. And I don't know if, do you want to make a few comments about the training? Describe it for our new members.
Yeah, we cover the kind of the fundamental rules of being a BZA member, and we cover the new developments in the last year, cases that have courts of appeals in the Indiana Supreme Court. Also answer any questions that you would have. We talk a lot about how to make findings of fact, how to support your motions with the evidence before you, that sort of thing. And we do it every year. And I will provide you with, I think it's about 15 pages of written material. I promise you I won't read it to you. I'll just cover some things during the meeting, but we'll have some information that's pretty thorough that you can take with you. It takes, we want it to take 30 minutes is what it looks like. I've done it prior to the meeting, and we've also done it at the end of the meeting. That it matters. Light agenda we're expecting in February, we could do it at the end, and probably not.
Any thoughts or questions?
As long as the light. But no, I'm fine with that at the end of the agenda.
Well, I think that sounds like a plan then. Mr. Smith, if we can plan for that on our February meeting?
Put it at the end. We have 3 petitions now, 1 continued and 2 new ones, so. Yeah,
Yeah, we made it longer.
yeah, so a little bit longer,
That's
but
okay.
it's okay.
Yeah, well, that'll be interesting. Good. If there's nothing else? Nothing else? Okay, then we stand adjourned. Welcome to the new members. Hopefully, we haven't put you off, but if you don't show up in February, we'll know we did. Hopefully
We will
not.
have our 5th member hopefully at our next meeting. So.
Thank you. We stand adjourned.
I don't normally make that many motions.